Good afternoon. I'm Karen Merrill, LCSW, presenter and EAP provider for RBH, and I'm delighted to be presenting the training today on applying emotional intelligence to the workplace. So our agenda today will include a discussion of what emotional intelligence is and what it isn't. We'll explore the dimensions of EI and learn how to develop it by understanding and managing our emotions. We'll look at how the emotional and logical aspects of our brain contribute to the development. And as we move towards the end of the training, we'll look at the importance of strengthening our listening skills. As you know, if you've attended our webinars before, polling questions are sprinkled throughout the training to make it more interactive. And hopefully we'll have time at the end for the opportunity of a question and answer period. There's a lot of material, but I'll try to go through it in a kind of summarized kind of way. By the way, the terms EI, emotional intelligence, and EQ, emotional quotient, are interchangeable, and you're likely to hear me say both. So, to set the stage for this territory, let's look at the first polling question. To be successful at work and at home, the most important factor for us is IQ, or intelligence quotient, or EQ, emotional intelligence. So we'll give you a couple minutes, and then Brenda, our trusty assistant, will tell us how you've polled this question.
Okay, so it looks like we have 91% of participants voting for EQ and 20% voting for IQ.
Perfect. So that's exactly right. Emotional intelligence is much more important to understand ourselves, others, and really how organizations work as well. So what is emotional intelligence? It's the ability to use our emotions positively, constructively in relating to others, to achieve our objectives and meeting the requirements of day-to-day life. Sounds like a mouthful, but we'll turn this into more chewable kinds of aspects as we go along. So emotional intelligence, again, is the dimension of intelligence responsible for our ability to manage ourselves and our relationships. EQ is a relatively new concept. Our previous framework for predicting personal and professional success related to IQ. IQ measured our ability to learn, absorb information. When I grew up, we took IQ tests. Maybe you did too. There was a scale for what ranges of numbers meant in relation to average and exceptional intelligence. Then in the 1990s, Daniel Goleman, a psychologist who was also a science journalist for the New York Times, introduced the concept of EQ and challenged our previously held beliefs about intelligence. He laid the groundwork for a new way of thinking. His first book, actually in 1995 on EQ, was a New York Times bestseller for over a year and a half. His later work has included an area of discussion on how important EQ is in the role of leadership. So it's pretty interesting stuff, I think, as you look at it in perspective. So let's look at the second polling question. Emotional intelligence helps us maintain an optimistic outlook on life. True or false?
Okay, it looks like we have 95% of participants voting that for true, 5% voting false.
That's great. So sounds to me like you guys have a pretty good understanding of the importance of emotional intelligence, and that's great. But certainly having greater understanding helps us maintain a more optimistic uh, uh, look at life in general. It also allows us to know ourselves better, adapt to changing circumstances, help others, respond more calmly and thoughtfully to difficult people in our lives. We talked about the optimistic outlook, increases learning on how to improve others to improve as well. And it helps us be more mindful and thoughtful about our decisions. What EQ isn't? What isn't it? Well, it's not about being nice all the time, even though we're considering others. It's about being honest. It's not about being touchy-feeling. It's being aware of our feelings and those of others. And although emotional intelligence is the title, it's not really being emotional. It's about being smart about our emotions and using them to an advantage. So here's Goleman's EQ model. He talks about personal competence and social competence, what we see, what we do in terms of self-awareness, management, social awareness, and relationship management. So remember this block, because now we're going to take each dimension one at a time and look at it more fully. The first is self-awareness, our ability to accurately recognize our emotions as they happen and understand our tendencies for responding to different people. We all get triggered by different situations and different people. The greater grasp we have of how we react increases our emotional self-awareness. It helps us more accurately assess ourselves, our strengths and limits. And it also relates to our self-confidence and what our capabilities are. Self-management, using this awareness to choose what we say and do rather than just speaking out when it's not going to be helpful to the situation. Allows us to take responsibility for our role, maintaining our standards of honesty and integrity. Increases our initiative and the readiness to act on opportunities. Being comfortable and accepting of novel ideas as they come from others in our environment. And it helps with our achievement drive, striving to improve or meet standards of excellence. So EQ isn't abstract. It actually puts us in the driver's seat and in control of our development improvement. What is most appealing, I think, is that it lifts the bar on limitation. It's not as if you have an IQ that you live with. You can have control over getting better and better at this aspect of development. So our social awareness, recognizing and understanding emotions and experience of others, including entire groups, in other words, organizations. Having a sense of empathy, sensing others' feelings and perceptions, and taking an interest in their concern. Looking at a service orientation, learning to anticipate, recognize, and meet customers' needs. Reading a group's emotional currents and power relationships. So not engaging in a way that's reactive, but being able to have perspective about what's going on. And helping to develop others, sensing their needs, and bolstering and encouraging their abilities. So that final block, or the fourth dimension, has to do with the relationship management. Our ability to use awareness of our emotions and the emotions of others to manage interactions. Has to do with leadership, inspiring and guiding individuals, aligning with the group of the organization, helps wield effective tactics for persuasion, acts as a change catalyst, initiating or managing change, increases communication by listening openly, helps with conflict negotiation and resolving disagreements, works with collaboration and building bonds for nurturing instrumental relationships, and helps build the synergy in pursuing collective goals. So using these skills to help organizations and groups of people manage more effectively and productively is one of the benefits of emotional intelligence. So let's look at our third polling question. Developing EI is hard because it involves all of these except how to understand our emotions, how to balance our emotions with logical thinking, how to use our IQ, and how to get along with others. So what do you think about this in terms of the exception to this question? So developing emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is one of the greatest challenges of our life. Each of us has the ability to experience emotion, but we didn't come into the world with a manual on how to understand the emotions, use them to our benefit, or balance them with logical thinking and dealing with other fellow emotional beings. Certainly, if we think about how little kids react to their raw emotion and showing anger and frustration, it lets us realize how important emotional intelligence is as a skill to be developed. So this next slide that talks about how well we apply emotional intelligence to the workplace is something that's attached as a handout, and you might look at this on your own rather than score it as a tool so that we don't actually take the time right now to do it. But there's some kind of humorous things involved here. One I like is when other people wrong me, I don't worry about it. I just tell myself they're jerks. If things go wrong early in the morning, I know it's going to be a bad day. Or then there's things like when I get stressed out, I use things like exercise, relaxation, and humor to recharge my emotional batteries. So this is a good tool to give you an idea on how you apply emotional intelligence in the workplace now. So strategies for increasing self-awareness. This is really the foundation for emotional intelligence skills. Learn to tune in to your emotions. What are they telling you? Observe yourself. Even set aside some time each day to reflect on your feelings and actions. If you have the time or the inclination, keeping a log about that and jotting notes when you have different reactions during the day can help give information moving forward. And participating in communication or style assessments. I hope you've taken advantage of our website, myrbh.com, and the personal development section, because it has a lot of good assessment tools that can help us further recognize what we're experiencing. And reminding ourselves about the importance of our own emotions and the impact that they have on how we feel at any given time. So we look at some assumptions that are made for understanding and the basis of EQ that helps us understand. So one thing is that emotional self-management is vital to the good life. So without a measure of wisdom, we can be miserable, even when we achieve financial and career success. And we're unlikely to achieve this lasting success, even in these areas, if we don't have some emotional wisdom. Knowing that we already apply logical intelligence at work is a way of understanding that we have already a leg up. Acknowledging that our emotional destiny is in our own hands, that whatever hand we've been dealt, we can actively improve our social and emotional self-management. We're willing to be realistic about our emotional intelligence. We don't know where we're going or could plot a course for improvement if we don't know where we are now. And while the principles of this course can help anyone more effectively, they can't really substitute for some professional help. So if you're feeling depression or anxiety or overwhelming stress that can get in the way of any skill development, you might consider using the EAP as a way of helping move forward. So understanding our brain's role in emotional intelligence. So our brain has two parts that work together as a team, emotion and logic. The purpose of this team is to protect us and help us actually achieve our goals. Each part acts as an advisor who offers you a different perspective and set of skills. We'll make the most of our intelligent decisions when we recognize the role of these advisors and make decisions based on their combined input. Sometimes one advisor shouts too loudly and drowns out the other's guidance. At other times, one voice speaks and the other remains silent. And at still other times, both speak at once and give us conflicting advice. But you'll make your most intelligent decisions if you recognize the roles of these advisors, listen carefully to both, and make choices based on the combined input. So we're dealing with some challenges here, as we do in life with our emotions, and knowing how to harness them. More on the role of emotion. Our emotions prepare the body for a certain kind of action. Anger sends blood to the fists and muscles, preparing the body to fight. On the other hand, happiness and love calms the fight or flight response, preparing us to rest, play, work, socialize, and enjoy life. These responses are programmed into our body because they're the ones that helped our ancestors survive and thrive. In other words, these things are hardwired into our DNA. We come into the world with that information. So comparing this with logic, emotion prepares you to respond to danger or whatever confronts you, challenging our body's limited energies towards whatever's most urgent. It gives us the motive for action, helps us act quickly without going through the often slow process of making a decision based mostly on logic. But it can also push us to act too impulsively without enough thought. Logic, on the other hand, can help us determine what response is appropriate in the situation. It does require time and information. Logic gives us greater flexibility, and the solutions that work for our distant ancestors often won't work for you. We can't run away from a presentation that's right in front of us. So knowing how to use both of these is the most helpful. So I'm going to try another polling question and see if we get any success here. Is it best to respond to a crisis with our gut feelings? True or false? It doesn't look like I can see the polling information. Let me just see if I can do something here. So I'm going to keep going since I can't see or I'm not hearing Brenda, and say that the answer to this is false. Although it can be an inclination for us, it really isn't the best course of action. So how do you respond in a crisis? In a crisis situation, it is especially difficult to hear logic. So if you're like most people, you respond on your gut feelings. What are the impacts of responding without thinking? If we take control of the way we think and act by listening to our emotions and thoughts, we can find out how we react in a crisis and in stress. If we repeatedly act without thinking, we can end up trying the same tired, ineffective solutions over and over. So, to get off autopilot, oops, let me see. Oh, I got, so Brenda emailed me saying that on the, on that question that 73 were false and 29% were true. So I'm glad you're able to hear me and then also be able to do that scoring. So let's keep going. And to get off autopilot, we need to be able to relax our body and our mind. So oftentimes in the grip of intense emotion like anger or fear, it's impossible to step back and examine what we feel and understand it. If we can relax ourselves, it puts our mind more at peace. We're not flooded, and we can think more clearly and understand what's going on. So we all know that a tried and true method of relaxing ourselves is to slow our breathing, take deep breaths, letting it out slowly, tensing and then relaxing our muscles is another way to help this. And then as we increase our state of calm, we can revisit the event that's caused us to become upset. We can think about what happened, how we reacted, and what we might do differently in the future to be more objective. In this stage, avoiding labels to people, like saying something like, he acted like such a jerk, instead thinking about, well, maybe he raised his voice at me at this time. Thinking about our thinking, catch ourselves thinking. After you've relaxed and reviewed it, accept what thoughts and feelings have arisen. So even saying, what did my body tell me about how I felt? Where did I feel this tension? What was my gut reaction like? Identify and describe our feelings. Was I angry, frustrated, sad about it? So that it gives us information about moving forward. Understanding what motivates us is key information. Motivation's the fuel that makes us go. Knowing what kind of fuel we run on helps us, our behavior, and empowers us to motivate ourselves. Part of this in thinking about the workplace is what parts of our work do we enjoy the most? And do we set those things first? and then procrastinate about what we like the least, or vice versa. So sometimes it can be more motivating to get those things off your plate that you're more frustrated about, so that you can kind of sail through those and get to the things that you enjoy the most. So looking at our emotional script, kind of, the schema how we see ourselves. If we peel into our emotional onion deeply enough, we find that many of our emotions are caused by the interpretations we make of the world and the experiences that we've brought into the world. So this actually lays down a script for our emotions to follow. We don't need, though, to be a helpless extra in this kind of screenplay that are written and directed by our emotions. We can largely write our own script, take responsibility, make the right changes in our thinking, and then you can kind of re-script your emotional basis. How do we do that? Well, we talk about learning what we call the ABCs of emotion, and we'll talk more about that. We learn to curb our demands, judge people more fairly, and argue with our bad moods. So we'll take this, again, one step at a time. You've probably heard yourself say, or heard others say, that made me so depressed. He made me so angry. He really ticks me off. When we use phrases like these, we place the responsibility for our feelings on circumstances, on other people. And as we know, it's hard enough to control ourselves, and we have very limited, if any, control over others. By giving them this responsibility, we also give away our power over our emotional destiny and how we react. So to regain this power, we need to take account of the ABCs of our emotion. So I'm going to let Brenda let me know how you score on this one. The ABCs of emotion are helpful for dealing with stress at home and at work. Okay, so Brenda says that the ABCs of emotion are helpful tools for dealing with stress at home and at work. 79 false and 39% true. So actually, the ABCs of our emotions and understanding that will help with stress both at home and at work. And we'll see how that plays out in the next couple of slides. So when we look at the ABCs of emotion, we look at kind of the activating event. What is it that causes a reaction and a consequence? And then we look at our beliefs about that and the consequences. So two people can experience the exact same problem, or what we call the activating event, and feel definitely differently about that. This is because the problem doesn't automatically go to the consequences. It's filtered through our belief system about that. Between A and C, there's a B, an interpretation. So, for example, an extreme negative interpretation of a problem or a person would be, what a catastrophe this is. It'll never get better. It's awful. So the consequence of that is that you're upset. You can be, activated by that. It's going to lead to an extreme negative feeling. So that is because our belief system dictates the consequence. So what we have to do is kind of intervene on the belief so that we challenge that thinking. And by the way, these ABCs of emotion are the framework of cognitive behavioral therapy, that, between what happens and how we feel about it is how we think about it. And that's where our control is. So this next piece is around curbing our demands. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, I don't make demands. Well, if you're like most people, you do make demands, at least in your own mind, of yourself, others, and the world. So you might demand that you succeed. You may have a very high bar on yourself in terms of expectations, or others. And you may think that others treat you as you wish to be treated, or that life should be simpler, easier, or fair. So we know that these last things are how we would like it to be, and not really the reality of what it is. So being able to kind of intervene on the demands we make of ourselves and others is really helpful, cutting ourselves and others slack. Judge people more fairly. Human beings naturally tend to unfairly judge and attach labels, especially when those people have been unkind to them. We're sensitive to that. It puts us on the defensive. So we need to learn to distinguish between the person and his or her behavior. So we know that if we've parented kids, that we try to look at the behavior and themselves and not label them by what they've done, but the behavior itself. So when we label people, it provokes us to sabotage our efforts to deal with them calmly. If we're a little more charitable and have a more realistic view, it can help us both in dealing with ourselves and with others. So, for example, if someone is in your face and behaves badly now, it doesn't mean that they're always and forever going to be that way. You separate the behavior from the person. So how do we argue with a bad mood so that we can change our attitude? By challenging unrealistic negative thoughts that produce it. So I like to think, if I've had a bad day and I'm upset, I like to think, how would I think about this and then feel if I were more rested, or I'm nourished, I'm not starving, or I was rested or exercised? How would I feel if I brought my best self to this? Is a way of arguing with that and changing your perspective. Behaving wisely. We've know enough about all this that we can be academically smart and still act in all kinds of self-defeating ways. Emotional intelligence involves not only thinking smart, but in behaving smart. Emotionally intelligent people are wise in their interaction with others. They employ excellent communication strategies, exercise self-discipline, and are flexible when it comes their way. The other thing about this is understanding our emotions and knowing how to make them work gives us an enormous advantage in the workplace in dealing with others, because we've been around long enough to know that not everyone is on top of these skills. So our last polling question. To enhance our communication skills, we need to become an active listener, adapt communication skills to our environment and what's going on, understand our emotional vocabulary better, expand it, listen to what's behind what others say, not just the words they say, or all of the above. So we'll let Brenda score this. So actually the answer to this multiple choice question is all of the above, since all of these skills are necessary for accurate communication. So to communicate effectively, as we know, great communicators don't just exchange data. They're able to express an emotional impact or importance. So to enhance our own ability, we need to improve our listening skills, take a step back, use our emotional intelligence, understand our emotional vocabulary in a more succinct way and understanding what's going on with others. We need to adapt our communication style to what others are telling us and listen behind the words. Use active listening to understand what's happening in that setting at that time. So as we kind of conclude, we've seen that many intelligent people can fail in the workplace because being smart is not enough. We've known a lot of smart people that we wished were a little more open to understanding their environment. Acting in an intelligent way is more important to our success than having the ability to do well at intellectual tasks. And I hope we've painted a thorough picture of this so that knowing that using emotional intelligence can help you move in that direction. So we do have time for some questions, and I'm going to see if I can open my question pane myself. And if you can ask them, then I can answer them as they come. Okay, so I see actually that somebody asked to give more examples on how to argue with bad moods. And I would say that it really does kind of have to do with taking care of yourself, with your self-awareness, that what might you be feeling at that time, and challenging the way you're thinking. So if I'm in a bad mood, I think about the fact that did I have an argument before I left the house this morning, and how will worrying about that, help my current situation? How do I kind of calm myself down, take a step back, deep breathe, look at what's helped before in terms of recentering myself, and looking at whether or not it's time for me maybe to think about talking to somebody. If I'm getting, if I'm having more and more bad moods, maybe it's time to get some feedback from my environment about that. So now I see what is the best way to respond to childlike behavior in the workplace. Well, I guess, and I'm seeing a number of things, and so I'm trying to not get distracted myself. Hold on. I would think about what I'm able to do about it. How much control do I have over the behavior of others? And try to, if I can impact that, I will. If I can't, then I'm going to have to hold that in a place that doesn't affect my own reactions and behavior too much. If there's a way to give feedback to a group and, talk about it in a way. But I think more and more, the most effective thing we can do is remind ourselves what we have control over and present, our best selves to that. So the next thing I see is, what's the best way to respond if someone says something negative to you? By using I statements, you can let somebody know how you feel about that. That when you hear something negative, that you feel such and such a way, and to try to open up a dialogue about it, to see what's behind it and see if that's something that you can talk more about and resolve. Remembering that you have control only over yourself and how you want to respond at that given time. So you mentioned, I mentioned that we're more sensitive to people who've been unkind to us. So what are some tools about that? I think it's knowing that we get our feelings hurt. We can get our feelings hurt, and that we become defensive or sensitive because we want to present ourselves in the best way. And when we feel like we're treated unfairly, it then kind of affects the way we think about that person. It's hard to be generous or open-minded about them. We can then label them. So I think that it has to do with reminding ourselves again that that you're not that person is not labeling you, or that it means you're an ineffective or whatever person, and try to, if you can, open up communication with that person and try to resolve it and talk to them about it in a way that uses active listening skills. How do I approach students who bring fragrance to a fragrance-free environment without making them feel? Well, that seems to me, and you might, double check, but if it's a policy, then you might remind them that that you're sensitive to that, and that's a policy, and that you respect the fact that they that's a behavior that they enjoy, but that in the environment it's something that you don't bring to the workplace, because that sounds like a policy to me. So how do you curb your demands beyond just recognizing them? It's thinking about, what that comes from. I mean, where are those demands coming from? Are those messages that you've heard, in your environment previously? Are there things that, your parents may have been demanding of you or your environment? Kind of looking where that comes from and how it makes you feel. How do other demanding people make you feel? So, and challenging your thinking. How could I respond differently to that? What might I say instead of that? It's thinking openly and creatively about it. And it's not easy. It's, changing behaviors and habits take a lot of effort and, a lot of repeated skills and sticking to it. But it's a practice that can make you feel more comfortable as you move forward. So what books and reading material? There is, a plethora of stuff on emotional intelligence. And I would look at Daniel Goleman's work, and then the other kinds of things that come up, that he even is in his references. Because as I say, he started this work in the 90s, and then he's brought it more into relationships with others, and again into leadership. So I would do Google searches starting with Daniel Goleman, and then where it goes from there. So what about dealing with individuals who will not stop talking when you're trying to communicate with them and interrupt when you try to respond? So one of the things that they say is to use somebody's name to get their attention, and then in a kind of a calm manner say whatever that name is that I know that we're wanting this to be a productive dialogue, and when I'm interrupted or when I'm not able to talk, then I don't think we're able to be able to accomplish that goal. So it's not easy, but I think using their name and then saying, can we take a step back here and try to slow down and each listen to what each other is saying to move forward, and even asking kind of, what are we trying to resolve here, can be something that can be helpful. And if you can't, if it's something that can't be done between the two of you, then maybe you bring somebody else in to, help with the dialogue in terms of, moving towards resolution. So are there any other questions that anybody has? It looks like this last one was just a couple of minutes ago, and I certainly don't want to close before your questions have been answered. So I'm going to leave it open for the next few minutes to see if anybody else has any questions. Okay, here we go. Let me see. Are there any videos that we can have staff watch? I would do a Google search. I would think from from a leadership perspective, there might be videos available. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know, offhand. So I would do a Google search about that. What do I do when my parents blow up during Skype when they don't get the answer they want? Whew, that's a tough one. I guess I would try to, kind of just say, let's take a time out here and, say that you can see how upset they are, but that, that's not really, that you have, that your response is also, you have a right to that. That's a hard thing to work on. But I would, again, kind of try to get on top of it and manage the reaction so that it doesn't escalate. I think that's the danger we get. So how long does it take? I think it takes, I think it's a process. I think this is all a work in process. It's like, relationships, working on relationships. It takes a long time, and it takes working on these skills to, strengthen them and nurture them. It's like a muscle. The more we work on it, the better we get. Any advice about teaching young children about emotion? I guess, and this is coming back from, work I've done with kids in a therapeutic session, but reflecting their emotion And also, I don't know if you've ever seen those charts, but when I did therapy with kids, I had a big chart that had all these faces on it that talked about, different kinds of emotion, depression and anxiety and happiness, and getting them to identify those. And so they get more in touch with what they're experiencing. And then as they get older, then kind of knowing what the consequences of their emotions or expressing their emotions are. How do you respond to constant negativity, both in staff meetings and during breaks? Well, part of it is that you don't engage, I think. In staff meetings, I would try to work with the leadership about that and how to kind of look at the tone of the meeting, and even open up that dialogue about how effective that is. And lunch breaks, I think maybe you don't engage, or and if somebody responds to you not engaging, that for you it's not a positive use of your time, and that's a break time for you to recharge, and the negativity is not really helpful. So one other thing, are there certain personalities that can't work together without creating a toxic environment? I can't answer that. I mean, I would kind of work with leadership about that, and it's certainly all about personalities for sure, is what, as we know. And if there are very distinct personalities, then I would look towards maybe do some workshop work around having assessments done, or doing some team building around that, so that it changes the dialogue and changes the patterns of what communications have been in place to try to get it to get unstuck. So we're just about almost out of time, and I know it's important to end on time. So what we might do is, if there are things that, questions that you have, you can send them to Brenda, and then she can send them on to me. And I'm just looking to see if there's anything else. And so Brenda says that I just got a note that Brenda's lost sound. So we've had some technical difficulties here that I definitely apologize for. And it happens, as we know, but we've reached just about the end of our time, and I know that you all, your time is valuable. So if there's any other questions, and I'll give you, if there's any other questions that you have that I can be helpful with, send those through, the webinar to Brenda, and then she'll forward them to me. And again, I apologize that this was a little cumbersome, and I appreciate your patience, and thanks so much for the questions, and I'm happy to answer any more. So have a good afternoon and the rest of your summer. I'm closing now. Bye-bye.